Welcome to 90 Degree Turns. I'm your host, Trisha Marcus. Allow me to guide you into your own endless soul expansion as we connect to your heart, discover balance, awaken to healing, and embody your soul's deepest expression. For those of you hungry to expand your minds, beliefs, and perspectives, welcome home. Tonight's returning guest is Geraldine Orozco. She has 12 years of experience in the holistic energy healing arts with certifications in Advanced Pranic Healing, Quantum Energy Healing, and studied for several years under a Shamanic Energy Healer. In 2013, Geraldine experienced a life-changing interdimensional contact experience, which resulted in the activation of psychic abilities of the multidimensional body and energy field. In 2017, Geraldine underwent hypnotic regression therapy. In the regressions, she uncovered a lifelong history of contact. Geraldine utilizes her deep understanding of the multidimensional body and how life force manifests on the physical 3D plane. She is able to see experiential agreements of trauma, fragmentation, Akashic records, and energy stagnation in the 13 etheric bodies. She's created DNA reprogramming as a healing modality in order to access, identify, heal, and transmute trauma fragmentation of the soul. Geraldine now dedicates herself to the dissemination of knowledge of hybridization programs and the re-examination of the commonly held dogma of the human genetic timeline, historical record, and advanced healing of the human biostructure. She is currently writing her first book, DNA Origins and the Human Hybridization Program. She's also the founder of hybridmother.com, an international research and support group for experiencers and contactees of ID phenomena. Okay, hey everyone, this is Trisha from 90 Degree Turns. We are here with Geraldine Orozco for episode 36. Geraldine, how are you tonight?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me once again. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, I know that we have spoken a few years back about your life story. You've got a really interesting story to tell. I know that you've had a whirlwind of experiences from like abduction to teaching meditation, and you've been featured in different movies and shows and the hybridization program. So there's a lot to kind of cover today, and I'm very excited to get this conversation started.
Awesome. Yes, I'm very happy. And thank you for having me back again. I can't believe it's actually been that long since we've talked, but you're right. It's been quite some time. Yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to dive into it and get into some interesting topics. Let's see where we go.
Cool. Yeah. So let's just kind of dive into how did you first discover the multidimensional body? Because that is something that not everybody gets to see right away, So, yes. So what was your story with that?
So essentially, in 2013, I had a conscious contact experience where I was taking on board a craft from my home. And in this craft, I was given a lot of information, different ET language. I was shown my hybrid children. I was shown the matrix, and I was also taken to the Pleiades and shown information there. And as a result of this experience, the next day when I woke up in my room, well, it was really just 3 hours that had gone by since 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. I felt that I got hit by a truck and my physical body was pretty impacted. I had sunburns and burning on my face and just a tremendous sensitivity to the body. But I didn't really understand what was happening yet until I went to the office on Monday morning. In which my client just came in, sat in front of me, and for the first time, I could see absolutely everything in her multidimensional body. What does that mean? It looked like colors, it looked like shapes, it looked like energies, it looked like information. I could feel what she was feeling, see what she was seeing, and all her thoughts and things that she was going through at that time. And I felt it in my body. I was empathic, most of my life, but this was just on a whole different level. This was a complete, almost as if it was an enmeshment with the person that you're with, and you just merge completely with what they're experiencing. And so what that allowed me to see was kind of begin to understand what emotions look like in the physical body, just from that moment on, seeing other people. And when I noticing the connection between the colors and the shapes that are in their bodies, when I see them, and what I'm feeling in my body, because I can see and feel everything in my body. And connecting those things to thoughts and memories that would come up for them, triggered by those emotions. And that's kind of how I began to understand the layers of the multidimensional body, its complexity, and essentially how we're co-creating our everyday experience, as a result of these emotions and thoughts. Literally, our entire, what we think is the aura, is actually a sphere of projection that we're literally creating our everyday life experience. And all of that information that we store within the body, not just in this lifetime, but all lifetimes, are basically being expressed and triggered through timeline triggers through our life. And so a human's life is really powerful, in which it has an opportunity of addressing these cyclical patterns through everyday life experiences. And if we don't address the root cause of these problems, we keep repeating them, And so what happens is that the body stores the information more and more, and over time it becomes stagnant. And what that looks like from my perspective is that, for example, the energy won't move. It'll be stagnant, and the colors will deepen. They go from a lighter shade to a deeper shade. The deeper the shade, the longer the program and the stagnant emotion has been in the physical body. The lighter the shade, usually it's out in the outer layers of the physical body. We're made up of 13 dimensional layers. And so the further out the information, the less conscious the person is about that information. The closer it comes to the physical body, the more they're interacting in that information. So I just began to learn, about this. And earlier in my life, I was very interested in pranic and quantum energy healing, and I took courses in that. But none of that really, really made sense until I was able to see on this level. And then I started to understand, okay, those people had the vision as well, because now I understand why they were able to see things the way they did.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. So I like that when you're explaining about how when things were farther out in the field, right, it was less perceptible to the person, which makes sense, because the more we're aware of something, right, it becomes like within our vision. So that makes a lot of sense, just from a, I don't know, visual standpoint of where something is. There's a lot to unpack there. So, okay. So how did you first get used to the change in your life? If you're suddenly able to see and feel and really connect with people in a way that probably was even more so than before, how did you get used to that? And how were you able to integrate that into like a living a regular, like a life, like a human life?
It was actually really hard. It took me the first 3 months, I couldn't leave my house because I would go to the mall, for example, to run an errand. And it was just like, oh my God, what is this? It was like going into a soup of energy, and it was painful because I was so sensitive to music, lights, sounds that are in the space, and people's energy, people's emotion. And I began to recognize that how environments are specifically designed to either limit or constrict the expansion of someone's multidimensional body. When I would go to a mall, for example, the internet network that is set up in a space is so powerfully strong in those shopping environments, because they have their POS systems running, you have the Wi-Fi running, all kinds of other security systems going on. It's pretty heavy. I mean, if you were able to see your environment, you're in between all kinds of energy circuits that are running through your physical body, and they distort our energetic field. So I became aware of that. I began to understand how different environments were designed for that. So it was impossible for me to go grocery shopping or any of that. It was just really, really hard to be in crowds. And when I would be in crowds, because I was new to the sensitivity, it would be difficult to kind of like protect yourself in a sense of how much you're taking on. And I would feel immediately just drained and exhausted. And this is where I began to implement all the tools that I had learned earlier on in my meditation practice of strengthening your energetic field. Now it was like the real training, of utilizing those tools. Like GPAC, I create that acronym: grounding, protecting, aligning, co-creating. Without that, I think it would have been extremely difficult. And I understand a lot of clients, they become ill when they activate these kinds of activities. Sometimes they get illnesses because they don't have the tools to learn how to master what belongs to them and what's external to them. So the first 3 months was extremely difficult, and it was trial and error, just going out in environments, beginning to understand as an observer what belonged to me, what belonged to them, and learning how to use energy and life force, how to master my environment using color, frequency, intention, awareness of my body 360 degrees, beginning to master, working with that environment. And I began to enter a completely different phase of my life where it's almost like you enter this Jedi, like the Star Wars film, the Jedis that begin to master their environment. I began to experience that in real life, changing things that would happen. For example, very, very simple, silly example is that one time I got pulled over by a cop, and I immediately began to create an invisible body. I don't want to pay, whatever amounts of money for whatever cop or anything like that, and the infraction was that a light was out in my car, And so I put myself in the invisible body, and immediately before he even got to my window, he had a call, and he said, "Oh, okay, your light's out, get it fixed. It's a warning." And he just ran off. And, it can seem like that's not very significant, but I tried in many, many different experiences where you can begin to shift what you're experiencing, and you can do so with your intention using color frequency and filling our space with that intention. We begin to change what we experience. So it was an incredible time in my life where you began to understand how much mastery we have over this hologram that really is. It's like a matrix that you can change, you can work if you understand the power of your mind.
Wow. I definitely believe in the power of intention. I know that it's helped me redirect and direct my life in different ways. And I love that you are able to then corroborate that with, your own like little experiences, but then also like the life that you lead now, because this is your life, right? The work that you do is like your soul's like calling, you could say, right? And you're able to share it with like other people through different events and your clients and everything. So it's wonderful to see it like manifest and show for others, like you can do this. Like if you can do it, other people can do it, right? And as long as we like hone in on our like intentions. So what do you think is with intention, what do you think is the most important that people have to master first, right? Because life can kind of be throw us like different ups and downs, and you can have an intent for something, but then it doesn't come through right away, right? So how do we kind of clean up our space, our energetic space? Do we think of colors? Do we like do meditations that you offer? Like, what do you think?
Well, it really comes down to understanding the mechanics of creation. What is the mechanics of creation? Essentially, we are these incredible technology and intelligence that projects reality. Okay, so if you really understand what that means, what fine tunes the projection is the information that is being informed. And the way that we work is that if your chakra system, your body is out of balance, each one of the chakras processes different kinds of information. So if any one of these chakras are out of balance, more open, basically what you're projecting is being informed by the chakra that is most loud, let's say, most out of balance. So if you're in a state of survival and fear all the time, your root, your sacral, your solar, those are going to be wide open. They're going to be out of balance. Those are the ones that are informing your experience. So what does that mean? It means that everything that you're going to experience, you're going to be projecting more experiences that trigger fear, survival, feelings of being unsafe, experiences that cause you to feel that you need to protect yourself all the time. And this is not just in the physical plane, but it's in the interdimensional plane. So even with ET contact, or any kind of interdimensional contact, it begins to match that resonance. Okay, so the mechanics of that means if that's out of balance, learn how to put it back into balance. We need to control the chakra systems. Our chakras are not just vortices that just end, that project here in the physical body. It's literally an entire layer of the body. it is a physical body, our first layer of the body, and it functions like an antenna that receives information from the external, process it through the organs that are connected to that root chakra, for example, and organizes the information in the body and stores it in the body according to that vibrational frequency. So as you can imagine, we're an incredibly intelligent computing system that every layer of the body is absorbing and processing, not just the front part of your experience, but 360 degrees around your body. So it's important to understand that, because a lot of people, Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now, so many different teachers talk about that. What does that really mean? To be in the present moment means to be completely aware of your body, 360 degrees. What's your leg doing? What's your foot doing? What's your back doing? When we don't have that awareness, our entire body is sentient and it's conscious. It's actually interacting with the environment without our knowing. And oftentimes we're taking in things from our environment that don't belong to us. We're storing other people's suffering, pain, fears, and we end up feeling exhausted at the end of the day, or full of fear, and making decisions based on these illusions of emotions that aren't really ours. So we live a life that we become puppets to our environment. And that's very dangerous, because it can cause a lot of problem in your life, causes a lot of suffering. And even more so, you're contributing to a co-creation of that vibrational frequency. So these mechanics of creation really go down to the laws of free will. What does it mean to have free will? Are you really making your choices, or are you a product of your environment? And are you part of a contribution to a system that is counter-creative as opposed to creative, right? So I think that these are the most essential things that we need to understand. And what it comes down to is understanding the emotions, the information that is stored within the body. So for example, if you're a person that stays in a state of survival, okay, it means that you deeply, deeply believe that you are unsafe. And this is not just an imaginary thing. You have proven to yourself through these experiences, perceptions that were created through experiences all the way since probably the womb, that have programmed the belief system that you are unsafe. So in order to change that, we literally have to go back to those points. And in those points are fragments that are created. When we experience trauma, these fragments are literally suspended in timelines, and they live in the bodies of our multidimensional body. They live in our field. So they become reference points. And when something causes a trigger, it takes us back to that reference point, triggers it. And since we learned there what to do or what not to do, this is the limitation of our understanding. And we pull from that. And so essentially we don't evolve because we keep repeating the same mistakes again. Our perception is very myopic. It's only focused on one tiny perception. So when we begin to change those points of reference, dissolve those illusions, because they are illusions, because you see, perception, the perception that we experience, it's only one side of the truth. Actually, an experience is actually many perspectives. The perspective of the other person, the perspective of those around you, the environment, all of those things play a role in creating a true understanding of an experience. So if you're stuck on just your perception, you're limiting yourself from understanding the whole picture. And so we kind of, in that same way, our entire human experience is about expanding the perception of our perspective from a very small into a whole, where we begin to have a broader perspective of ourselves and the role that we play in the bigger picture, So this is kind of like the fundamental role of that. And your free will is basically choosing, are you doing something that's self-serving and only good for you right now? Or are you choosing something that is good for the collective? And if you compare that to that experience of trauma, and you ask that aspect of yourself that experienced that trauma, it can completely heal them from that suffering that they were experiencing in that moment. So it can be incredibly powerful to review your life in these cyclical programs that you're holding in your body. And it turns out that it becomes incredibly compassionate of yourself to begin to change those limited perspectives into something more compassionate for yourself and a broader view of what you can potentially be experiencing. And we're coming into a state of neutrality ultimately, and of unconditional self-love. So I think that is the most important thing to understand.
I think that the unconditional self-love that you're talking about, that's what it means to be human, right? I think ultimately that's what we're here to experience is that. And it's not easy because, as you said, like you have to go back through the different like timelines of your own life in this life, or potentially a simultaneous life, right? And to find where these triggers happen and to re-understand them in a way that is, I guess, for everybody's greater good, right?
Yeah. Well, essentially, we're here to experience everything. And that's kind of the thing that people kind of struggle with, because they think, oh, we only have to be happy, only have to, be joyful. But the truth is, we're here to experience everything. In this dualistic experience, that's what it's about. It's being okay with the unknown. And it's actually in the unknown, in the most traumatic experiences, that we evolve, that we grow. And if we can find our way from that separation into a vision of unity and truth in that unknown, this is how the human begins to evolve in a really powerful manner.
Have you experienced with your clients that the unknown could be a very scary place for many people?
Of
Just because they don't
course.
know what it is and what can be on the other side.
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the biggest fears for any human, is to be taken out of their comfort zone. This is true for psychological advancement as much as spiritual, as much as physical. We're afraid of heights. So, you take yourself into that height and you begin to deal with your emotions in that place. You're learning so much. You're growing, not just energetically, but your entire vibrational frequency begins to change. Literally, we each have a frequency. Every single one of us has a certain frequency, and our vibration has a color. Okay. And that color basically is usually in the crown chakra, because the crown chakra is where we are uniting the non-physical with the physical and then projecting into reality. So all the belief systems that we have create this one vibrational frequency that we're constantly emitting. And so what happens is that when you have transformative experiences, you literally shift that color. Your frequency changes. And if you can look at a lifespan of a human, it's going to look like a rainbow, because it goes from so many different colors. It's evolving. If you look at the life of a person that hasn't done a lot of work or challenged themselves at all, their colors are going to be changing, but very minimally, very minimally until the end of life. But we are always evolving anyway, collectively. But the more we change, the more we challenge ourselves in the unknown, the more we can progress. So yeah, it's really important.
I do say the right to stepping into what may people fear the most is where they can find the most growth in the end.
Right.
Can I ask you, with the colors then, is it like, how in all the spiritual books, like red is the root chakra, sacral is orange, like the colors, are they all the same for everybody, or can you have your own color system that works for oneself personally?
Absolutely. Absolutely. However, it's like this, colors and vibrational frequency. The color of a frequency depends on its heaviness and the speed that it's moving. The faster the color, the lighter it is. You're getting into pastel colors, white colors, silvers, translucent colors. The lower and heavier, the more dense the color is, and the darker it becomes. And if you look at a rainbow and if you study color, it's really beautiful, because you find that actually it's kind of like a fractal. Colors function like fractals as well, because they in order to organize colors correctly, you have spectrum within spectrums within spectrums of colors. So for example, there's going to be many shades of yellow. You're going to organize them in a spectrum, and that spectrum is going to be similar to the entire whole rainbow that includes this yellow color. Okay, so we're moving through these different ranges. The movement can be micro, it can be small little advancements, or it can be very large advancements from one whole shade of color to a whole different shade of color. So usually more impactful experiences that someone has, the bigger the shift in the color will be. Now let's talk about the actual shade of color. Most humans that are still cycling in the karmic cyclical pattern of the physical realm, information as a whole is organized in 13 spectrums of information. And those 13 spectrums are defining archetypal definitions. So all the information in this matrix is kind of organized within these 13 dimensional planes. And so within the body, we have 13 main chakras, 13 main colors. In the astrological signs, for example, we are being born under these 13 main signs of information. And each one of those it's a certain frequency. They have certain information, certain challenges that each one of those signs have to overcome, certain positive traits that they have to overcome. So the frequency of the body is similar to that. And for those that are very much attached to the physical realm, they're usually within the colors of the first 7 chakras. Okay, so just like all the books say, red, orange, yellow. So usually their colors are within that range. People that are already beyond the cyclical karmic cycles and patterns of work, their colors are very different. They are translucent. They are sometimes rainbow spectrums, pastel colors. It's completely different frequency. So so just like we can transcend our astrological signs, because we are influenced by these archetypes as long as we're playing the matrix game. If you're no longer playing the matrix game, you're not influenced by those things anymore, because you're creating your reality, and you're kind of abiding by different spectrum of frequency. So it kind of changes. But for the majority of people, you will notice that they are mostly moving around these base colors. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So I guess you're reading by the book, essentially, right? If you're within the karmic cycle, as you said, and then once you kind of get out of the matrix, then you exude different color types. And I'm sure it's a different frequency for those who if you can see the colors that are there. I would like to know, given the different work you do with clients and such, have you noticed since like, let's say 2020 or so, that there's been like a collective shift within those different colors that has been around people or clients? Like, has it been going, I don't know if it's possible to say like a general direction, but have you noticed anything collectively?
Yeah, I mean, definitely more people are definitely let's say going into the depths of their subconscious mind in a more powerful way. Color frequencies. What I notice is that our DNA collectively has activated. What does that mean? That we have access to broader bands of information. Now, that doesn't mean everyone is accessing that information, but when you see the body, I can see all the way up to the 13th dimensional layer of their body, as opposed to before, it was more obscure in those higher levels. That means that our DNA has activated in that the strands of that junk DNA, the DNA that we're not mostly aware of, is completely available for the human. So, and this is part of the collective evolution, because right now we're moving through this very key moment in evolution where things are speeding up as we're reaching a very, very key point. It's almost as if a singularity of this multiverse that we're reaching. And once we reach, we're not there yet. We still have quite some time to reach that point. But the closer we get to that point, the faster things are. What does that mean? That when molecules are moving at a faster rate, we're a match to higher dimensional planes. We have access to higher dimensional planes. So our astral projection will become more lucid, more clear. We will be able to navigate levels higher. And all of that changes the physical body. The physical body now becomes more of a not so physical, not so, you can move and change time and space. So
it's fixed.
What's that?
It's not as fixed as it could be before.
Exactly. It can change, and we can enter other dimensional planes easier. We can merge, we can pull in information. So many channelers, I mean, left and right channelers everywhere are now channeling information because of this. People are speaking light languages, which is basically just different frequencies of information. And so the more people that begin to tune into those gifts, the more they change their body, their physical structure. And as we need to do that collectively, because when you don't do that, the physical body will self-destruct. Usually they will die. They will leave the reincarnation cycle and come back as a different frequency in order to match. Because all humans, as we're moving through this cycle, we're evolving. But if you are resistant to that evolution, if you're always in a state of fear or on the unknown, you won't be a match to every next new timeline that becomes available to you, to the collective, essentially. So the accessibility to the information is there. The choice of the person to access that information is completely up to them. But there are consequences if you don't, right? Because then the physical body becomes ill, and sometimes we dissolve. Yeah.
So I would like to talk about this, the DNA, right? Because a lot of people talk about how special human DNA is, how there's different entities and beings out there that look over Earth, right? And they're like, this, you guys are genetically modified, you're created here for a reason. You guys are special, right? So, but what is actually so special about human DNA? Because you look at our DNA is so similar to, like, I think a fruit fly, it's like 90 something percent.
Right.
Like, we look so different than all these things on Earth, but we're actually very, very similar. And so what does that mean? What makes humans so special?
Well, I don't actually think that the human DNA is special, as in it's unique to another species. I think that our human potential is exceptionally powerful, because in the physical three-dimensional plane, you can affect many things from the physical. So it's not that the DNA is special, it's that the opportunity in the three-dimensional realm is special. And so our genetic code and our genetic information allows us to have access to all simultaneous timelines, whether they're past lives, future potential lives, and simultaneous fragments of ourselves that are interdimensional extraterrestrial aspects of ourselves. And so we are basically genetically modified organisms. And what does that mean? It means that genetic information that is taken from other species is utilized to create us. In this three-dimensional plane, what is expressed is the physical body that most fits Earth and the environment and the laws of physics here in this Earth. So the design of this physical body is very specific to the environment. But the interesting thing about that, and especially with the time that we're in right now, as time is speeding up, the ability for the physical body to begin to move beyond the three-dimensional plane is available to us. So it is a window of time that we're experiencing on this side of that singularity point, and on the other side of the singularity point, when we end up on the other side, will allow us to navigate beyond the physical body. And this is something that we need to train for. It's not something that we in this lifetime are going to experience in this timeline, but it's something that will allow to propel and to merge the data that we have stored within the genetic information. For example, the hybridization program utilizes the code in the physical realm in order to splice and continue to create a combination of everything that we are containing in the physical body and other higher vibrational frequencies of future timelines. And so a hybrid is created, and that hybrid is sometimes inserted into the timeline exactly where it needs to be inserted based on its resonance. You know, so it's actually really, really interesting. But the human body and the genetic information allows the ability to connect to everything that's in your genetic composition. So let's say that you are Arcturian, Pleiadian, Lyran combination. You have access to all of the traits of this archetypal expression of frequency that is the Arcturian. What is that, for example? Holographic technology, intuition, mastery of matter, healing abilities on the highest level. What's the Pleiadian? Creativity, arts, creation, sexual energy. So if you tune in and you fine tune those abilities in your physical form, you can really transcend the laws of physics in the three-dimensional plane. You can manifest, you can create, you can merge, you become a superhuman essentially, right? And so the amazing thing about the human is that it has the ability to activate those parts through the genetic information. And that's what makes this experience in the three-dimensional plane so important. If you don't deprogram all of the matrix programming from the three-dimensional plane, you will continue to reincarnate in the three-dimensional plane. And just like all energy that becomes stagnant, we want to make sure that we are fluid in our movement, right? And so you have a choice either to continue reincarnating here or to move on to higher frequencies and experience something more than the three-dimensional plane. And that's a choice that each human has to make through its ability and understanding of what it means to be aware and to apply its free will.
So I find it interesting how you mentioned that, like, let's say Arcturian and Pleiadian, let's say Lyran, those are different archetypes of, because I've heard, you know, about the tarot, how there's different archetypes there, and you talked about
exactly
zodiac signs and all of that. And it's the first time I've heard that the different extraterrestrial species could be looked at as archetypes as well, because they have their own, looks like they have their own set of, I guess, abilities, right, or fortes that they're in. So, okay, so I don't know exactly where I want to go with this, but I feel like sometimes people, they really, really identify with certain lineages, which is great because that means that they have obviously something to learn with that lineage that's there. But what does one do with that information? Like, you can learn that you're of these three different places, probably even more than that, because we've been around the galactic history for a very, very long time, right? We're infinite. So where does it really like come down to? I don't know exactly what I want to ask.
Yeah, I understand your non-question. Basically, and it's a very important question because right now, sometimes people get very caught up on the idea of what is an Arcturian, what is a Pleiadian, and they want to hold on tight to that identity. But as in everything else, even our human experience, we need to be like water. We are constantly evolving. We cannot get stuck in any one form or definition. Even our personalities, we don't want to get stuck in personalities. We have to continue evolving all the time. The key is to be neutral, to be in that point of singularity at all times. That 0 point is the key to all creation on all dimensional planes, essentially. So if you can remember that every lifetime, you're going to be, you know, moving through quite well, and vitality and healthy and creative. So every single one of these archetypes of vibrational frequency, they do different things. They are assisting your path, but on the bigger picture, we have ancestral lineages. When we come into the earth, we incarnate. We're in resonance to a certain family lineage. And this bloodline is cycling through specific information since Mesopotamia, since the very beginning of conception of life on this planet. In that lineage that you have, there's many different races that are part of your lineage. This means a couple things. Number one, there seems to be certain councils of interdimensional beings that are in charge of certain genetic lineages, and they oversee hybridization programs and families of those programs. That also means something else, that every single bloodline in your history plays a role in the information that you have available, in the karma that you're cycling through, and in the things that you need to transcend as a soul. Each new soul that comes into that ancestral lineage is specifically encoded with the ability to either continue the cycles or to unlock greater expansion for that entire ancestral lineage. We need to start seeing ourselves as a whole lineage. You individually, me individually, we have to see ourselves as a whole lineage as opposed to just yourself and personality disconnected from that. Because our entire life is designed to break those patterns, but we don't realize that. And sometimes we end up becoming victims of our traumas and our suffering. When we transcend that, that's when things start to get interesting. We're healing grandmother that had the same problem. We're great grandfather. And when you go deeper, you begin to release collective groups of collective trauma. Okay. I will give you an example. When I began to look at my lineages in my bloodline, there was a profound fear of abuse towards the female, for example. And I followed that all the way back, my entire family. I discovered all of the abuse for the feminine that happened in my family, not through reading, not through looking at your family tree, through meditation, through yourself. You can see this information. Everyone can do that. And it goes all the way back to, let's say, South America. Part of my bloodline is from Bolivia. Began to see groups and groups of hundreds of women that were descendants from the bloodline that had been abused with a certain information. And the systems that supported that kind of trauma goes all the way back to Europe, all the way back to Mesopotamia, and essentially the preservation of a certain bloodline that goes all the way back to, let's say, Magdalene bloodline. Okay. It is the same thing. We are repeating these archetypal types, the destruction of the divine feminine, the destruction of the intuition. It's almost as if within all of that world history is a metaphor of a concept that we need to change collectively. And this is what each human is here to do. If each human were to do that work in themselves, we are liberating not just ourselves, but fragments of all of us, essentially. And we heal the collective. When I do this work, I raise my frequency. That's what it means. And I'm raising the collective. My family now has an opportunity to heal. And it's true. They now have become curious about the work through my work. Just by working in the higher levels, they also heal. And it's incredible. This is how you begin to heal your collective. So let's talk about the ET aspect. Hybridization program, because of this specific bloodline that I have, been utilized many times in the hybridization program. My grandmother was a part of it, my mother, my aunt, all of them, all the way back to the beginning. So in that same way, on other dimensional planes, we're creating other ancestral lineages that also are going through the same healing and evolutionary process. So the more we become aware of that work, through these bloodlines, let's say an Arcturian bloodline, we heal because everything has duality, all of the inverted activities of the Arcturian frequency are healed. And the Arcturian frequency, for example, the inverted aspects of that are manifested within these traumas. Let's say the inhibition of the feminine intuition in my bloodline that I was explaining earlier. I found the connection between that and the Arcturian. Once you heal that, you can activate the Arcturian gifts. You can activate your holographic healing. You can activate light language. You can begin to connect with all your hybrid, all these things. So you are opening layers upon layers of yourself in the multiverse. And that's what we're here to do. And essentially come back to unity, which you find at the end of all this work that there's no separation. You are one with everything.
Yeah, that is so well said. And I can tell you from my own experience where there's like little things that maybe not always in like a lineage format, but when there's little things that I find that I can like start tweaking, like a certain block or a thought that comes through that's like repetitive. And I start looking at it, I'm like, where does this come from? And I start tracing it backwards. That's when it gets really interesting, because then I can find it, let's say in my life, or like just an experience that happened. And then I could start tracing that further. And sometimes it can go to like a parent's lineage, right? Or farther back. And it's something really wild to start doing that. It's wild, because you're like, wait, I thought it was just within me in order to fix this one thing. And then it kind of opens this entire like Pandora's box. And I find it very, very interesting how you mentioned that it can then, the inverted aspects of, let's say, an extraterrestrial lineage is then directly correlated to the human aspect. And then once that's healed on a human level, it just ripples out like a stone dropped in the water.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's really powerful.
Very interesting. And also, I want to mention that what you'll find is that really, really dark parts of us root in reptilian and draconian lineages. Okay, so we may not think we have those lineages, but I guarantee you that the majority of the beings on this planet have roots, because again, we're here to experience duality. And so when we evolve, we also help them evolve, right? Because we have to remember that just like humans are evolving in this evolutionary process, every single race is evolving too. Draconians, reptilians, they can choose to evolve as much as they want to, but they are evolving whenever we become aware of these aspects of ourselves. And many hybrids that are being born right now are being born way more awake, with way more immediate visibility and connection to these aspects of themselves. And this is necessary to understand, because it helps us understand healing and how to support the children. Because if your mind is nowhere near this, it's going to cause them a lot of suffering, and again, fragmentation and disassociation with potential incredible gifts that they can tap into, you know.
And then when you think of like when a child is created, right, it takes both the frequencies of the parents at the time, and then it's like the staircase, and the kid can bring that, and then like on and on and on, and it keeps on going. My question to you is then, so this was coming through when you were talking about the different lineages. So then how does that make an impact in, this might go like conspiratorial, but how does it go into the impact of all the like the 13 bloodlines of the world, right? Because they're trying to keep their lines so pure and like unobstructed, I guess you could say, right? How does that impact their frequency and power within the world? And then, I mean, everyone, everyday people like us, you know?
What does it mean to keep a lineage pure? We are compartmentalized in families where we think there's the mother, the father, the brother, the sister, right? In ancient times, none of that really mattered, to the point where it was like it's taboo for these brother and sister to get married, or brother and cousin, or whatever, even uncles and nieces, you know, get married. That was heavily practiced because preserving the bloodline, when that happens, you are reinforcing the information in the data from that bloodline. For example, a lot of these original bloodlines that we are somehow all descendants from the Draconian bloodline, okay? Because when, you know, the Archons created these different compartmentalized spectrum of frequency, it manifested into first the Draconians, and from the Draconians, all these other races that now descend from there. And these much older races are representing the primal aspects of the frequency, right? The further away from that primal first aspect, the higher it becomes, the more, the faster that vibrational frequency is moving, because you're moving from the center point to the farthest point of that creation. So essentially, what these frequencies are doing when they're preserving a bloodline is they reinforce something specific. If you are interbreeding one of these really low vibrational frequencies, like they did a lot of these draconian bloodlines, there ended up the manifestation of dragon lineages, even the dinosaur lineages that were there, manifesting into a lot of these very, very high level militaristic societies. Okay. And from the other side of that, the lineages that were much more high vibrational frequency, they didn't so much do that. The purpose of those vibrational frequencies were to merge as much as possible with the dark, to begin to again reunite and become one. Essentially, the human race has become that. It's become, over the many centuries and years of evolution, simultaneous timelines, the one. Now everything is intermixed. We have everything. And we're headed in the direction of even further unity as we evolved. We have moved from the darkest separation into the lightest of unity. And we've experienced that in the human race. So they tried very much to keep these bloodlines and preserve them, but eventually over time the light has dispersed them. And what we know as the Christ light, right, this Jesus light, which is the highest point of awakened light that inserted into the bloodline, was also heavily preserved and thankfully merging in with these darker lineages that we're preserving in order to dilute that information. Something interesting is that this whole situation that happened with Hitler and what they were doing in order to eliminate certain kinds of bloodlines has nothing to do with religion. It had everything to do with the kind of bloodline that was created during that time. And that war that was created, it was always occurring, but it was highlighted when Hitler came into power. It never stopped. And the last couple of years of our life, we re-experienced something similar happening in the collective, where certain bloodlines were more targeted than others. And this goes into a whole different topic, but we've been experiencing that little by little. If you understand the structure of reality and how societies were built around the world, why certain areas are more impoverished than others, and if you study the bloodlines that are more prominent in those areas, you will understand how the compartmentalization of information has segregated certain bloodlines to places of less power, supposedly. And now
make people feel that they are in less power when they're absolutely not.
Exactly.
They actually, there's a lot of information and knowledge within their lineage.
Exactly.
They can only access it, right?
Exactly. And most of these, what we call minorities, right? Well, at least in the US, but also in the collective understanding of what races are higher elites and what races are the lowest. The information that is suppressed from those ancestral lineages is essential to the evolution and progression of the collective right now. So more that we rise, the more that we unite, the more that we connect with these roots of ourselves, we can access information that transcends the illusion of the matrix, and the compartmentalization of that. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. It's a tall order, but I feel like we can go through it as long as we all just keep on doing the work, because it won't really end,
Right.
It's just a consistent experience. I do want to ask just a couple more questions here, but more on the topic of, okay, you mentioned how people can have a soul that's fragmented, right? There's different fragments of themselves when someone maybe misunderstands an experience or needs to gain more awareness of something. Then, what would be the difference between like a fragment and an aspect? Because can someone be like having like a Andromedaean aspect, but then they have a soul fragment, or is it one of the same? How does that work? It's a little bit more basic question. I think it's important.
No, no one's asked me that question, and it's so important. So thank you. You know what? A fragment is occurred. So fragmentation is, you can call it a forced, a manufactured separation. Okay, it's a manufactured separation. And when a manufactured separation occurs, a person will experience trauma because they're put in a circumstance where they feel that they don't know how to manage that circumstance, and they feel completely helpless. They feel lost. They don't have any footing. all understanding of morals and ethics in that moment is completely gone into question, and there is no foundation for their ability to learn how to navigate that experience. When that happens, the human is disconnected from its core essence and what it's experiencing externally. So a disassociation will happen psychologically, but physically, the body is fragmented, and it is, again, manufactured separation. So the aspect that is experiencing that trauma now is suspended in a timeline, because it's really interesting what reality actually looks like. Is we're kind of like moving through these threads of timelines. Every single choice that we make, we're choosing a timeline,
like a train track, like you just move from one track to the other.
Yeah, kind of like that. And however one of these timelines we choose, it basically immediately creates the next available timeline, like in vivo. So when this aspect of yourself is stuck, depending on how traumatic the experience was for you, it will be a big point of reference. And you're going to keep moving to the next potential timeline that is designed by this point. And as you keep moving forward, you're going to keep on referencing this. It's going to completely influence your future creations. That's a fragment, an aspect of yourself. You are an aspect of the self. Okay, so this body is an aspect. Within this body, we have infinite fragmentations. Okay, so an aspect is basically a fractal of source. And within your source is, you're coming from source, but from source, we have infinite fragment aspects of ourselves that manifest into these fragments, okay, and fractals of yourself. So for example, you can have an Arcturian fractal of yourself, you can have a Pleiadian fractal of yourself, and you can access that information. It's basically, let's say when you have ET contact, you connect with a gray, that is not something separate to you. We create it. It's a part of our entire aspect of ourselves, and it is a match, a vibrational frequency to this fragment. Okay, you can leave the physical body in astral plane and go into the experience of that gray, and you can experience the gray as yourself. You can experience what they're experiencing. You can see what they're doing. You're going to have the illusion that you still have this physical body while you're experiencing them, but you have merged with their timeline. So this is how we can navigate and explore non-physical dimensional timelines. This is how hypnotherapy works, actually. When you put the physical awareness in a dormant state, you begin to activate the subconscious mind, and you can travel in those dimensional planes. You can access past lifetimes, simultaneous lifetimes, which are also fragments of yourself. So if you have experienced a life as Queen Elizabeth, you tune in, it's like you change your frequency to that fragment of yourself, and you live the experiences that were expressed through that life. And the same thing with your Pleiadian aspect. It's a different frequency. All of the past live experience, simultaneous lives, are within the 8th to the 10th dimensional layer of your body. So when you leave the body, all you're doing is you're going out to 8, 9, 10. So that is all still designed by the Matrix multiverse, which means that the experiences that you're going to tune into are just going to be repetitive cycles of everything that is programming the Matrix. If you go beyond that, and you have to change your frequency to match it into the 9, 10, 11 dimensional planes, now you're accessing extraterrestrial aspects of yourself, interdimensionals, angelic beings, and you can access those higher planes. That's where they live. So this is how you navigate. It's very different, but again, it's like what I see is self-similar patterns that we're seeing in all things, the way we see it in spectrums of a rainbow, the way we see it in healing, the way we see it in the fragments and fractals of yourself. We begin to understand that, we are just like selves within selves. essentially. I hope that made it clear.
That does. And so I got another question on top of that then. So when someone has an experience with like, let's say a gray, right? Okay. So did they create that experience because they're a vibrational match with that being then? Or is it part of their soul contract? Or is this, I don't know, they're emanating a frequency. I guess that would be a vibrational match. How did that occur then? Because how do you know then that the being that you're talking with, right? Whether, because not all grays are bad, right? Not all reptilians are horrible. Like there's in between. It's not all black and white. So how does one know where that cultivated from? How that relationship starts?
Everything is in your genetic code. You already have that. When you meet any race of any kind, you are that. It's in your genetic code. So, and this is why some people see beings that are not from the 13th spectrums that we mainly associate with. They're completely different manifestations, which means that they're oftentimes navigating in higher realms, or they've had access to higher dimensional planes prior to this life. So they tune into aspects of themselves on those dimensional planes. So everything is encoded in your genetic code. So if you have a gray in your genetic code, when you begin to unlock those dimensional layers of yourself, you begin to access that aspect of yourself, which is, for example, the gray. And so in your experiences, you will meet that gray. Remember that there is no time. We think of time as a, beginning and end, past and future. It's all simultaneous and it's happening all now. So in the now, your experience yourself as a gray, you might be meeting yourself in that experience, actually. Okay. And this is very hard for the human to wrap their head around, because they need to have an order, to events and to experiences, but that's not at all how these things function on the other level, which is also why I highly advise to kind of pull away from any kind of stories that are talking about galactic wars of the past, or where all of these dramas, like sometimes I hear, and even getting too stuck on ideas and concepts of councils and federations of groups, because everything is ever changing all the time, and each individual connects with infinite councils that are protecting bloodlines, not just of this lifetime that they've experienced, but other bloodlines of other lives that they participate in. Basically, all of their ancestors in their bloodline have had millions of councils that each one of those bloodlines have connected with. And so what we're doing, the more we become awake, is that we're reading that information. And it's not necessarily happening now, right? Or in this idea of like, what I mean by that is like a war that happened whenever isn't affecting this current moment. We have to keep evolving.
Entirely that.
Yeah. And so essentially, regardless of the time, we can choose what we align with and what we bring in. And we have to be careful, because if we bring in some drama from there into this moment, it can affect us physically. And this is how contact ends up leaving physical marks. People have very traumatic experiences in their contact, and then they have to focus on recovering from that. Okay,
so then,
and that.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you feel that when someone has like a traumatic experience, is that, I guess where I'm not understanding is that an aspect of them, or is that a soul contract? Like, did they create that to put themselves so they can grow and they can help that lineage grow as well? Like, what's the root of that?
Those agreements are made way before you even come into this life, because again, there is no time. There is no time. So all you're doing is you're becoming aware of yourself in that experience. That's all that's occurring. You're seeing yourself in that experience. It's a fragment of yourself experiencing that experience, and all you're doing is tuning your radio and tuning into the station that is telling you about that experience.
For deeper understanding of the self, right?
Exactly. And sometimes you can be tuning into something that's happened to your mother as well. More than likely, if you're experiencing something traumatic, it'll be in the family lineage, because there is a very strong resonance to that kind of activity. So that's why it's important for us to take that information and to heal from it, so that we can begin to change and affect our children. I have some contactee mothers that have their children that are actively having contact, and they get very desperate about it. But in order to heal that mother has to heal herself in those experiences, and she has to reintegrate from those experiences. And then from there, it affects the child's experience. Now the child is not in alignment with that. So in other words, there is no helplessness. There is no victimization in any of these experiences. We have the ability of changing immediately the timeline and experiences that we're having. It all depends on your understanding of why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. The agreements to experience that are made way beyond this timeline. They're things that we simplify it by saying you made that agreement in a time where you were less conscious, but we have to remember that we are participating in a whole organism. So there is no right and wrong. And this is very hard for the human to understand, because they're like, no, if they do something wrong, that's wrong. But in reality, everything plays a role. From our perspective, it can be wrong, but when you broaden the perspective, you realize, oh, this is supporting this part. This is supporting this part. And there is some kind of intelligence and balance to all of these things that are happening. We have to just remember that and try to keep ourselves in a state of neutrality as much as possible, even though some of these things can be hard to integrate. Because the more you stay in neutrality, the more power you have of shifting and changing and healing from anything that potentially can be happening in other dimensional planes, and they can affect your life. They can affect you physically. The other side of that, we also have healings that occur with ET contact, right? We have people that are spontaneously healing from cancers after contact. So as you can see, we have access to the polarities of these dimensional planes. And it's like a playground that you can choose what your experience will be based on your understanding of yourself in the now, basically.
Well, Geraldine, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love that you brought up about changing perspectives, because on this channel, everything we do is about expanding your perspective. So it flows so perfectly. This has been such a fun conversation, truly. Thank you. So where can we find you? I know that I think you have a few different websites, right, geared towards different types of things. So why don't you tell us about those?
Well, yeah, if you'd like to get a DNA reprogram with me, you can visit GeraldineOrozco.com. And I also do hypnotherapy, and you can schedule that at GeraldineOrozco.com as well. If you are an experiencer and you are looking to get support either about your hybridization experience, man or woman, or any other contact experience that you've had, you can visit hybridmother.com. And I have a monthly support group there, and really great activities and workshops that you can join and participate in. And another great way to access my work is my YouTube channel that you can visit, Geraldine Orozco, on YouTube. And I have a lot of free meditations and little works and stuff that you can access there. So that's it. Thank you so much, Trisha.
Well, thank you, Geraldine, so much for coming on. I love your meditations. I feel like they've personally helped me grow so much in my own, just awareness of the energy body and just healing things that need to be healed, so thank you for the light that you shine to the world. It's wonderful. Everyone, if you like Geraldine stuff, please check it out. We're going to have all the links in the description below. And then we want to say a little bit quick spiel from our sponsor, which is Merlin's Lab. They make these wonderful little orgonite pyramids. So this one's a small, it's with rose quartz, but they have all different sizes. They're all custom made. And this is a big one here. It's one of the big generators. They have giant quartz crystal inside. And this one has tourmaline, tiger's eye, and rutilated quartz. So they're beautiful works of art. And also they really functional, because crystals are alive and you can program them and talk to them. And it's just a wonderful thing. So if you guys are interested in it, please check it out. The link will be below for Merlin's Lab.myshopify.com. And if there's any other questions, you guys can reach us through the YouTube and through our website. So thank you everyone for coming on, and we'll see you on the next episode. Alrighty, bye.